Really good leaders are constant learners. There's something about when someone just internally begins to believe in their self. If you're not a constant learner, then you won't learn from what you've done, because what you'll do is your insecurities won't let you feel the mistake. You won't put your foot to the gas when you need to, and you won't stop when you need to. You could be seduced by someone's talent or their potential. People like that will get you killed, and organizationally. Do you have the fortitude to actually learn so it can teach you?
So how would you define a high-performing leader?
I think a high-performing leader is someone who...
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy. And we have a birthday in the house.
There we do.
Grady Escobar, who is our wonderful creative director meets producer, does all of our content, social media manager, everything in one, really.
Everything in one. Again, my man Grady back there, multi-talented Grady. Not only producing our film, but the streets have been waiting for him. Again, an incredible rapper as well. We've been waiting. The streets have been craving Grady. I feel like this is like waiting for Kanye's, second album to come out. You know what I'm saying? Not that new trash he just put out, but some of that old Kanye. We're waiting for that new Grady to come out. So anyway, happy birthday to Grady, man. Love you. Appreciate all the work that you do for us and making us get this content out there in a real creative way. So appreciate it. So yeah. So with that being said, Bree, we got a podcast to do today. So what are we talking about?
Today we are talking about how to be a high-level leader.
All right.
We are learning for one of the highest of levels of leaders.
Oh gosh, okay.
Mr. Adrian Crawford, who I didn't get to introduce in the beginning because he began.
Yeah, we go. You couldn't find anybody, so it's like, hey, we got the highest level leader that we know. All right, you.
No. That's so funny.
So anyway, talk about high-level leadership. No, whatever. High-level leadership. So
okay, so before we begin, though, I want to ask you a little bit more of a fun question that ties into what it is that we're going to talk about.
Let's do it.
Which is, what qualities to you stand out in a person? And this is, within any area of life, specifically leadership, though, which is the qualities that you see and you're like, I want some of that. Like, I just wish that I had that, and I really admire it. Yeah,
I think one. And I look for this in people, and I love to see, especially those who are older, that are coachable and teachable. Like, to me, it's the number one quality, I think, of any great leader, that they're constantly able to be taught. They're constant learners. They, when they're wrong, they can admit that they're wrong. When they can admit that they don't know everything, and they can learn new stuff, and they're willing to change and adapt. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest ones. I think the other one is, for me, is like the ability to adapt fast. I love when I see somebody like they just go with their gut. Like they lean into it. They're like, yep, we're going with it. Like they kind of worked long enough to know when it's the right decision to make. They have a feeling. They have gathered the right information. They know how to process the information they're looking for. They know how to get that intel really quick, and they can just adapt really quick. There's a few people I know who do that, where they just get it and they go. And once they know, and they're all in. Like they're not hesitating. They're not doing that, and they're willing to live, kind of with that. I think the third thing is, I think people who are risk takers, and what I mean by that, not like crazy risk takers, or when I say that, like I should say crazy meaning that like some risks are just crazy, like they make no sense. I'm talking about those. Those risk takers who are they're thought out about it, but once they go, like they're all in. Like they are fully all in, and what I mean by being that, they're willing to risk stuff. Meaning like, oh man, on the other side. Sometimes I envy that, because I think sometimes I can hesitate. So I'm like, oh, what about this? And I start thinking about everything and everyone. And if this happens, if this fails, then man, I would have to get rid of this person, or I have to get rid of this thing, or I have to do this. And sometimes I envy people who can just put those things on the table like that and just like, yo man, I'll roll the dice and do that. And so I think that's at a high level. Yeah.
How much do you think confidence plays a part of each of those characteristics?
I think it's a big part. I think that there's something about when someone just internally begins to believe in their self, and in believing in their self, that's I want to be, how I look at that is not someone who has an overinflated view of self. I think it's someone who actually is really self-aware. Like, let me tell you this, Steph Curry, for example, is incredibly confident shooter of a basketball. Well, he has shot well over, probably 2 to 3 to 4 million shots in his life. He has proven that. So when he shoots a 3-pointer, like almost every time he lets that ball go from his hand, he pretty much thinks it's going in, because he's done the work and he's seen the results. He knows who he is. He knows what he does well. I think really good leaders I think they have confidence. I think that is such a big thing, but it's those who've done the work, but they also know themselves, and then they've seen the results as well. They're not just saying, well, I'm just confident. Because a lot of times I see people who are confident in stuff where you're like, dude, you should never be confident in that because you're not good at that, or seeing results, or even showed an aptitude of a skill set for it. So yes, I think confidence is a huge thing.
What is your biggest leadership ick? Like when you see it, you're like, no, I would never hire you.
Oh, 100%. When I see someone who is not, as I said earlier, who's not like teachable or coachable, no. I've made that mistake way too many times. And now and even back then it used to turn me off. I was like, ugh. But you could be seduced by someone's talent or their potential, or, maybe you had a need and they could fulfill that need within the organization. So you're willing to do that. But it is one of my biggest things, because I think that if they're not willing to learn, people like that will get you, and I said, people like that will get you killed, and organizationally, when they're out there and they're not willing to learn. Because what they'll do, they'll have they're overinflated in their view. If you ever think you're at a place where you cannot learn, and you're not trying to learn, and you're not willing to admit mistakes, and also you're not willing to seek after to kind of keep growing and developing, then you won't recognize some really critical areas and mistakes in your life, or mistakes within how you lead, and I think that can cause a lot of danger over time. So that's my number one thing, is people who aren't teachable or coachable.
How does that kill the organization?
I think it kills the organization, because if you're not a constant learner, then you won't learn from what you've done, because what you'll do is your insecurities won't let you feel the mistake, and if you're not trained to consistently be a learner, then it's not just about gaining information, learning that way. If I'm a learner, and trying to gain information or talking to someone, or being able to receive information from someone who may be a higher up, or someone who's been better at something, or who's been farther along, and they try to give me some advice, and it's really good advice, but I'm like, my insecurities or whatever it is, like, why am I listening to this? Or I don't even go chase it. If you can't do that there, you're definitely not going to do it when you're in an organization. And let's just say you mess up and you're not learning. You have to constantly be a learner. And so you can't just do it only in certain areas. I think really good leaders are constant learners. They're constantly trying to learn and get better. They're trying to allow even that situation, organization, where it's a good thing or a bad thing, to teach them. So that's what I mean by being teachable, not just from person to person. I'm talking about from how you build to how you lead to, something you did really well. Did you allow that to teach you so you can do it again when you make a mistake? Do you have the fortitude to actually learn so it can teach you? So that's why I think when people don't do that, they want to evaluate. They want to evaluate mistakes or evaluate what they do good. And ultimately, you won't put your foot to the gas when you need to, and you won't stop when you need to, which ultimately ends up killing the organization.
Because we value development, there are times where we will actually put a higher capacity leader under the leadership of what might be considered a lower capacity leader.
Yep.
What do you think is the benefit of doing that?
I think that a lot of times if we do that, it's because, we may see the potential in someone, but they actually haven't produced anything. I think sometimes what can happen is you can put someone in a situation where they've not produced anything, and sometimes you put too much weight on the bar for them. Also, a lot of times learning that the hustle, learning how to the character it builds in you to actually work for someone who you may believe that you have more talent than, or you have a higher leadership lid than they do. It actually teaches you to walk in humility. It still teaches you to learn. At times I feel like I've worked for people who I feel like I've had more like maybe ability than they did. But let me tell you, when I did that, I actually learned, and I learned a ton from them. Even though my capacity there, that doesn't mean I couldn't learn. And I learned a lot. I learned what I learned meant some really good things to do. I also learned some things that I would never do. And so I think that in those moments, you actually start to learn how to do that. You also begin to put yourself in proper perspective. I think it can beat out some pride in you when you work for somebody, And that's what I want to see. I mean, can someone, for me, are you able to work within the organization? And if you really, are you committed to the organization that you're willing to work? And are you willing to, with somebody who you may be better than, are you willing to trust that there's a plan? That's the other thing too. Part of being a great leader and being a part of a team is that you have to trust. And sometimes you have to trust the person leading, that he or she sees the board and they're trying to work on something. They're trying to help you develop, but they're also trying to help what's needed within the organization right now. Because also that person who, it's not just only about you. It may be about, man, I need to get this person who's above you, who may be a lower level leader. They need to be pushed by you to expand their capacity as well. So I think sometimes all that goes into play.
Yeah, I think to your comment about being coachable and how important it is, the times that we'll put somebody in a box and kind of leave them lower within the organization is when we realize that they aren't teachable or coachable, even if they have like the perfect skill set to fulfill a higher level position. Yep. It reminds me of a while back, we did something called the New Roles Conference. And we had a guest, it was Brad Augustine. Yeah. And he said, I will never forget this moment. It has marked my life. How his talent and his skills took him to a place that his character wasn't at the point to hold. Yep. And I think that we live that value out really well, where we won't allow people who don't have the character to fulfill a position to actually be in that position of leadership. Yeah.
Shout out to my man, Brad. Brad helped me, me and Brad, one of the first business I started, we actually did it together, and man, we built something pretty cool together, and unfortunately Brad found himself in a tough situation. But what's been awesome is watching, kind of even Brad's redemption of that, of like, a pretty difficult moment to now, watching what he's built. I mean, he's back. I mean, he's super talented, uber talented, one of the most talented guys I've ever worked with, and watching him now build his life and doing phenomenal. Family's phenomenal. The work he does is phenomenal. But it's this idea that if you can, and I actually, before I came in here, I read a quote from a guy by the name of Andy Stanley. He says, you can lead without character, but you're not a leader worth following if you don't have it. So he said, you can lead without it. I mean, that's what I think sometimes people are, well, you can't lead without character. It's not true. You know how many people freaking lead Hitler. Right now? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of people who follow. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there, and yet who are leaders, but you're not worth following. And I think that's an important thing. We think about a leader worth following. Leaders worth following are those who show up to their funeral. They're the ones you give flowers. Leaders who aren't worth following aren't the ones, matter of fact, you're not really, you're not giving 2 cents about it when that person passes away or that person moves on. And so I think actually, it's about longevity and legacy that you're trying to build. I think really good leaders should try to build a legacy. And I think you have to have character when you do that. I think you have to have resilience. I think you have to have, toughness. I think you have to be empathetic. I think you have to be someone who stands on the word, have some, there has to be like moral integrity to what you do. And so I think that really does matter a ton.
I think Brad is an example of an insane and incredible story that we will not share because we will save it for whenever we start having guests on this podcast. 100%. So we will save that for that time. And you will be one of those.
He definitely will be one, yeah.
So how would you define a high-performing leader?
That's a great question. I think a high-performing leader is someone who, first of all, they have clear objectives. Whatever their objectives are, they reach those objectives. But I think a high-performing leader, they actually raise the standard and help others reach their objectives as well. I think if you're only reaching your objectives, then I think you could be a leader. I think you'd be talented, but that doesn't mean you're high-performing. I think high-performing leaders raise the tide level for people around them, to where when you get around them, it forces you to have to be better just because you're in their vicinity. You're just around them. You're like, crap, I'm just, I will never forget when I was doing basketball training, and this is a little bit different, but there was a young man by the name of Al Thornton, and Al was an NBA lottery pick. Al was one of the toughest, hardest working dudes I've ever been around. When Al was rehabbing, coming back, and he would come work out, it was something about when he would walk in the gym because of how hard he worked, it raised the entire workout. So I used to love when Al would come work out because it was like he just raised the level. He was very quiet, didn't say a whole lot, but like he'd get in there, everybody's level just picks up. And I think a leader does that. I think a leader can raise your level. A high capacity leader raises the level of those around them. They meet their objectives, but others are meeting their objectives as well just because of what you do.
Do you think that everyone has the capacity to be a high performing leader?
You know what? Here's what I say. I don't know if everyone has that. I think everyone can be a good leader, but I think about a team. You know, when you have a team, like not everyone on the team is a superstar. You have really good role players, and that doesn't mean, and their roles are incredibly significant. But I don't know if everyone can be that. Defining on the fact of, man, like not only do they hit their goals, but they raise everybody else's goal, and they just kind of have this like energy around them. They have this ability to create momentum around them. I don't think everyone has that, but that does not mean that that you can't be a great leader. When you talk about a high performing leader, I think about, I think about people who sit at some of the high, like, I mean, they act, they work, and they get things done at the highest level. I know I use athletics a lot, so I'm around it a lot, but I look at, the LeBron James, the Steph Currys, I mean, we're looking at Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, people like that, like people who just raise the level of everyone around them. I think those are like high performing leaders, but I think there's really good like people who do really good jobs and make things better, and you need those people as well to make a team good. And I think that's important. I think that's important for people to know as a leader. Here's the other thing about being a high performing leader. One of the things about leaders, they're self-aware, and so they actually know the level of skill set they have. And for some, we always talk about people like facing reality of like, man, you may not be that as talented as this person or whatever, or sometimes people think they're more, they think they're better than what they are, right? But on the other side, what we don't talk about is the leaders who actually are good enough, what they owe. We expect people, we want people who may not have the talent to face reality. We always say everybody wants to be like the whoever superstar entrepreneur, superstar leader. That's who they want to be. They all strive to be that. But what we don't talk about is those who actually have that ability, what they actually owe. Like, we want them to be self-aware. Well, if you have a skill set, then you need to be self-aware and what you actually owe to people, what you owe to actually show up and to be there and to create for others and to move things forward. You are responsible for doing that. And I think so many times those people, we don't put the pressure upon them to actually do that. Or sometimes we kind of let it go or just, whatever. But I think, no, man, you are responsible. If you have I just realized this is that, when you have been given talent and gifts, man, like I heard it once said that our God's gift to us is what his like our talent things, that's God's gift to us. Our gift to him is what we actually do with it. And so I think a lot of times people don't do a lot with it.
Do you think that the number of talents, so if you're a 5 talent person, 1 talent person, or anywhere in between, that relates to how high performing you are?
Yeah, I actually believe this. I believe that I think you have to have, like we talked about, there has to be this character side. I think there has to be the self-aware, there has to be the character side, right? You got to have resilience, grit, all those things. Then I also think you got to have some self-awareness, and I also think you have to have talent. And I think if you have all three now, and those that if you do the first two, I think all of us can have that, right? I think the other one, I think that there's certain capacities I think people have in life. I think, we see it all the time, right? I mean, like, listen, Elon Musk, regardless of your thoughts of him, the dude is a brilliant mind. Like, he's just one of one. He really is, like, the way he thinks. Like, you think about Steve Jobs. He was, like, different. You think in sports. Like, you watch LeBron James is 6'8", 260 pounds, about probably 4% body fat. Like, they're just not that. Or Victor Wembanyama right now, he's 7'5". Like, I mean, like, yeah, man, like that dude just, like, he's got some talent. He's had to work, but he's got some God-given talent as well. My point in saying that, I think to be a high-performing leader at a very high level, I do think you have to have that. Now, when I say that being high-performing, I define high-performing, right? And let me just be clear. I define high-performing as someone who is, who sits at a very high executive type of level. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a really, and again, I don't use a language like high performing leader. I just think you could be a great leader, good leader. But high performing for me is someone who is out there and they're getting it done. And matter of fact,
because do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
I feel like we're talking through. Yeah,
because I'm really trying to figure this out.
That's why I wanted to talk about this today, because I was interested.
Yeah.
Because what you just said, which I don't think is fundamental to your belief is that if you are in an executive position, that means you're a high performing
Yes.
leader.
Yeah. Let me back up. I think this. Now that I talk about this is the beauty of doing a podcast, this is the beauty of thought, is like, yeah, let me redefine that. I'll say this. I think I think people can be high performing leaders. And that means like whatever your job is, you're able to get that done. And I do believe in my definition, you're able to get it done and you're able to help people around you. And I agree with you. If you sit in an executive role, I don't think that makes you a high performing leader, because there's a lot of, trust me, there's a lot of freaking average people that I've been around that should not be in that actual role. And so I actually think it's people, again, going back to the definition, I think it's people who have the ability to bring those around you, meet their objectives, bring those around you, and pull them up as well. And that could be someone who could be, you could be doing maintenance at an organization. But, man, it's like, man, everybody that's on your maintenance crew, it's like you guys meet your objectives, you pull everything up. I think that's a high-performing leader, yeah.
Okay, question that I think could help further define it, too, is, if we're ranking people on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, and somebody is at their starting point is at a 5, and within their lifetime, they get to a 6. You have someone whose starting point is at a 2, they make it to a 5. Who would you consider high performing?
The 2 to the 5.
Because of what they did with their ability to double what they had.
That's it. Yes.
Speaks greater to their capacity than their natural
Yes.
skill.
If you're a 5, if you're a person that's a 5, yeah, I think you should be able to bump yourself up, man, 2 to a minimum of 3. But you're going up 1 and somebody jumped 3. Yeah, I think that other person is more of a high performing leader than that person is. Yeah, for sure.
And I think that because traditionally we've only focused on like skill or I guess IQ, natural talent when it comes to fulfilling positions, especially in leadership. We've really seen people who stay pretty stagnant in their growth. Like, of course, maybe they start to get a lot better at finance. But as far as like leadership ability and capacity seems to stay pretty static, I feel like, in what we've experienced.
Yeah, and I think it's because, going back to the thing is, I think one thing that gets missed, and it was what I was saying earlier about being, why being teachable and coachable is so important to me, because being teachable and coachable actually makes you learn how to critically think. I think that's one of the biggest things that I believe can really help people take big jumps to become high-performing leaders, is to become critical thinkers, to actually really dive into a situation and to think about it, you have to be able to process your own emotions. Am I reading this right? Am I reading this wrong? I feel a certain type of way, because a lot of times your emotions and your feelings about a situation, because of maybe it hits a part of your childhood or a part of a real trauma event or something like that, can hinder you from seeing a situation, actually observing and learning from it well, or being able to read it right. So I think you got to be able to process your own stuff, but then you also have to be able to think through that at different levels of how this plays out within your own skill set. So I think critical thinking is a huge part of actually helping someone grow to that next step of being a high performing leader. But I think that helps. Yeah. Cause sometimes people if it's just your talent, at some point you get stagnant. You're right. Like, it's just, okay, you're great and talented, but what else are you doing? I mean, you think about this, it's like, guys like Michael Jordan and again, Kobe Bryant, that these guys will say, even like Tom Brady was like 40 something years old out there. Like, just because it wasn't like Tom Brady was the most talented guy in the NFL. Like, as far as at that point in time, like physical gifts, like he had started to get older, but he still was winning because the dude was just, his ability to like critically think, the confidence he had to know before he gets to the line, I'm doing that. He could just pick you apart. He didn't have to have the strongest arm. He just knew, you're going to do this. I know I'm going to go here. And it's like, he just kept getting better. So he's still dominant because he just kept working on the mental aspects of it to critically think, to learn, to add those things. And a lot of people stop because all they'll focus on is, their ability to sell. They can talk to people, their ability, they, maybe their financial skill set or do that. But when you don't learn how to like think or learn how to even like lead, now learn how like the leadership qualities that it takes, empathy and, the ability to motivate and inspire, stuff like that, I think you can get stagnant.
Yeah. And I think to highlight one of the reasons why we always talk about self-awareness and that being such an important quality for leaders is because where we're going futuristically in the world is people will not work for places that they don't view as credible.
Yep.
Meaning that if you don't say what you mean and do what you say, people will not want to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you lack self-awareness, you are going to say things as if you mean it, and then you're not actually going to act those beliefs out, and people are going to be able to sniff it out and call you out on it, and they're going to not work for you anymore. Yeah,
I mean, you may get a talented person at the beginning because they're just looking to climb, but talented people won't stay in your organization. That is a fact that that what is happening is, talented, high-performing leaders want to be in a place where they know it's authentic. They can live with mistakes. They can live with you not being perfect. But do you actually know you're not perfect? Do you know where your mistakes are? Do you know where your flaws are? Are you willing to admit those flaws? Are you willing to, if there's someone younger within, there's somebody junior on a project, and they actually got the best answer? I mean, I heard this one time that, like Greg Popovich, who's the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, he's a legend. He's probably one of the best. I mean, one of the best NBA coaches, but coaches in general of all time. The one thing that Pop will do is, he goes around the organization and he'll sit there with an intern film guy, and he'll ask him a question like, "Hey, you've been watching this film. How do you think we should guard? How do you think we should? We plan on guarding tonight against Anthony Davis." And he expects you to give an answer. And they've said there's been moments where Pop is has walked out and said, "Hey, if a guy does it, they're not willing to answer because you think about it, that's Greg Popovich." So you're like, this dude, of course he knows how to do it. And what they've said that Pop will turn around sometimes and walk out and say, "Hey man, we gotta get rid of him or get rid of her," because they don't actually know. He's asking you a question, he wants you to know. And so my point is, if a guy like that can come into an organization and ask that stuff, they want to know, are you always trying to learn? And then there's been times where he actually did, and someone gave him a good answer, and they actually did it. And that shows leadership, because you're willing to get leaders just want to get the job done. They don't care where it comes from. And so I think that's going back to the original question. I think people aren't going to stay in an organization if they don't think you're actually aware. If you're not aware, if you don't have an understanding of your feelings, your reason, your motives behind why you do what you do, they won't stay with you long. They'll be there for a moment, but you will definitely be a stepping stone for their career.
If you think about high-performing leader, one of the qualities being that they know how to hit their objectives and create a level of excellence where other people want to do that as well, and do end up doing that, and they're able to kind of double what they have. Do you want all high-performing leaders in your organization?
I think that you want as many as you can at whatever level there are. Here's what I want. This is the best way I explain it, because I think as we've been talking through this, is actually helping me even define this more. And that's one of the great things about what we do in this pod, is a lot of it is it's free flow. It's top of mind. It's not canned things. So sometimes, I'll start my conversation. That's why I tell people, I will start one way and I'll work my way communicating. I'm like, oh, I don't really think that way.
We're cool with changing our minds.
Yeah, we're cool with
That's
changing.
a part of the whole self-awareness, resilience to remain self-aware.
Yeah, I would say that here's what I think that you want high-performing people, yes, across your organization, but here's what you want. You want self-aware, high-performing people, because what I mean is that, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about self-aware, can you meet your objective and then create momentum around those who are around you to help them meet their objective, right? And to grow and develop. Well, let's say I mentioned earlier about the maintenance guy. Let's say you got a team. But man, it's like you guys are maintaining, you're maintaining multiple. Let's just say you're a maintenance guy on a university campus. So your whole job is to maintain all the buildings, all the lawn maintenance. There's a lot of people that work for you. You're the head maintenance guy, right? And you're overseeing the lawn care. You're overseeing the elevators being fixed. You're overseeing sinks. Everything that goes on the university campus. And you got your team rocking out. Man, I believe that's a high-performing leader. The problem is that when that high-performing leader then all of a sudden starts trying to I think I should be over here in the English department trying to run the English department. And you're like, all right, you're good here, but you may not be good there. Mm-hmm. I think it's awareness. I see that a lot with, I will tell you this. I see that with a lot of sometimes older high-performing leaders. They think they're experts at everything. All of a sudden you'll start talking to them and they're really good at one thing. And dude, they'll start talking to you like they're experts at cooking. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to, people who are older, and they'll start talking to me about what I do. and they're in a completely different industry, nothing to do with what I do. And they'll talk to me so matter of fact, oh yeah. And not just, hey, here's principles of leadership. They'll start trying to like get into the weeds. Oh no, you need to do this, this, and this. And you're like, what is wrong with you? It's like, one, a lot of times they say they're completely wrong. Two, the arrogance of it. And so I think that's the key. You want high performing, self-aware people.
Sometimes I feel like older people do that because they just want to connect with you.
Yes.
Do you ever get those vibes? You're like saying all this. I think you're just saying that because you want to talk to me.
Well, and you know, what the problem is that and the thing is, I'm a sucker for this because I'm always trying to learn. So I'll sit with those older. I'm like, hey, like, I just will talk. And like, hey, and I just want them. I'll talk. I want them to talk. Yeah, and I want them to talk because I want to learn from them. Because like I'm gathering information. Even if they're talking about the story about when they grew up, I'm gathering information that helps me understand what kind of made them who they are. I'm learning their backstory because that formed this. I'm just gathering information, and it always helps me. But yeah, but then you're right. They'll start going down the road. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? How did we get here? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you're talking about like how to design a YouTube video. I'm like, you don't even know how to.
You're stressed out. Your body's starting to hurt.
Yeah. So I'm like, dude, can I please leave?
I lost an hour.
I've had that more than
I know you have.
More than once. You're like, dear God, man. Yeah. So.
Okay, so whenever it comes to hiring somebody, how much do you consider culture, and how much do you consider skill, and how much do you think that other organizations should consider that?
First of all, I'm a firm believer of this. If you are not, here's what I would say. A cultural fit means this for me. If you're not teachable and coachable, you're not a cultural fit, not even close. And now some people may have come from a place to where, you know, they may have similarities to the way that we do certain things. And so that's okay, great. And if you have that, but you're not teachable, coachable, you like won't do it. You may have no similar. You may have been in this industry before. You know, you've never been involved in, you know, consulting, building culture, things like that, leadership development, executive coaching, whatever. You know, I see this in the church space. It doesn't matter. But you actually are teachable, coachable. That's the thing. So the answer to that, I mean, no, cultural fit is huge. But it starts with, again, being teachable, coachable. I think it's there. I do think you got to have some talent as well. Like you got to have a skill set and talent in what direction you're actually heading in. And I think a lot of organizations, what they do, the more and more I look at their recruiting processes for a lot of people, it's just really bad. It starts off with, if you think about it starts off, okay, here's all these requirements. Like you're already taking so many people out because your requirements are you have to have a master's degree in this. And then when you actually ask them, tell me, and you ask almost anybody who's interviewing, anybody's at an executive level, I've asked this question so many times. Hey, how much of this have you learned? Your job you're currently doing, you've learned on the job. And they will tell you, it's 100%. I've not met one person. They're like, oh, I've learned almost everything. They've said I've learned everything on the job.
Okay, can we talk about that one time? I won't say the client, but they're major.
They're a major
if we said
brand.
It, you know who they were, and
yes.
We're sitting at the table, and you were like, to the CEO.
Yes.
You do realize that you require a master's degree to work at an executive level here, and you only have your associates.
They had their associate's degree. He was a CEO of a national brand, and they were struggling, wondering, man, we need more diverse talent pool. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the thing. Some of these people who come from minority backgrounds, maybe first generation, some of them they have to start working. They can't take on other debt. They may be helping support their family members, so they've got to start working. But they have the skills to do it, but they don't have the education. And that's always my thing. We have just built, and it just becomes rinse and repeat, and it's lazy thought. Again, critical thinking. That's why a lot of people, they don't critically think about their processes because it's easy. Well, this is what we do. Hire this firm. Or put this recruiter out there who we hire, and then you just put all these things. Well, because here's what they do: we filter out all the whatever, and we get the top whatever. No, you don't. You actually can lose some people because my whole thing is like the most important thing is not so much, again, like we talk about, there's the hard skills that people have, but then there's the people skills. Listen, the people skills are the most important thing. Like they're the most important thing people have. Like, is someone teachable? Like, it doesn't matter Like, you know how many people I know are smart and got like A's and are just a-holes and unteachable? That doesn't determine that. Are they resilient? You know, are they adaptable? You know, are they quick learners? All those things you can't tell by, oh, they have their master's degree and they went to this university. That's why you have to then, I think people have to start measuring, I think, people skills way more than actual hard skills. Because if someone has, and again, they have to have a level of intellect for sure. They have to. But you also have to go down the line and say, man, but like, hear their story. Because let me tell you this, you start to hear people's story, you're like, oh, yeah, like this person, they'll do anything and they'll learn anything. And I think people lose out on some super talented people based off of things like that. And so I think that, kind of going back to the original thing, we have to measure other stuff within organizations, I think, to start actually having better talent and having better cultural fits. I think people but again, it goes to critical thinking. Those people who are in a position to actually help do that do not critically think and don't see the value in critically thinking about what's the best people to have within the organization, what skills are needed, what person, like, do you critically think about the person who's had success here? Why have they had success? Like, are there any traits and characteristics that everyone has? And I guarantee if you start going through it, you'll find them. You're like, oh, this person had this, person had this. It may be, oh, they all work for this person. They work for these 3 people. Oh, no, this person came here. You know what? That's why people are learning. Like, there are a lot of people starting to hire athletes, college athletes, because why? Oh, they know how to suffer. They know how to work with people. They know how to have a mission and go get it done. They're willing to go the extra mile because they had to do it. They're learning. They don't have to have 5 answers, because sometimes, you know, you're playing, especially you're playing a team sport, playing a big crowd. There's chaos everywhere, and you still got to find an answer when someone decides to do something different that was actually not there. Those are all skills that get trained. I tell people, college athletics trained me to see what I see now. I was literally trained to see everything. So that's why I can compute so much personal information, because my whole existence was being able to know, I have to run this play, but if they stop this, we have to go to this counter. I know our best player hasn't touched the ball in 3 possessions. I've got to get him, because if I don't get him the ball in these 3 possessions, the next 2 times he gets the ball, he's going to shoot a bad shot, and that's going to mess us up. So I know him. I already know how his facial expressions listen. So I got to go talk to him like, yo, you're fine. You're here and here. And I got coach yelling at me. I got 10,000 people. That's all the stuff that's just going through your brain. So you're just compute information all day. So that allows me to walk in a room. That's why in about 5 minutes, I can just I can just read the room, because I've been so trained in doing it. So anyway, I said all that. Soft skills and stuff like that really matter. That's a lot to say. Soft skills really matter.
Today I learned that when you take a look at somebody's resume, the percentage that it can determine success in the role is 1%. That's crazy.
But that's what I'm saying. That is my problem. I have such a problem with the processes within corporate America, or just in general, we just get a resume. Okay, like, that's a part. That is it. And it is as you saw, it's a tiny part. You just want to make sure you don't got like a serial killer, like trying to apply for like head of HR. You know what I'm saying? You're like, all right, this person got some credentials. Okay, cool. But then it's like, now are you doing any testing? You know what I'm saying? Are you then in your interview process, what questions are you asking that can help you discover, does this person have that skill set to do this? Oh, do they have the technical ability to do these things? All those things go into play, and I just think a lot of organizations don't do that well. And the ones who actually do that well really are good. Like, I mean, I have a friend of mine who he's not even in like an executive, he's not like in the top 2, if you think about like levels 1 and 2 of Amazon, right? I can't remember how many levels they have. I mean, he was probably level like 6, 7 or something like that. But I mean, again, it's pretty high. And he's this guy was a 30-year professional. I mean, really good. And he in his 50s decided to switch his jobs. He went to go work for Amazon. He's working for Amazon now. And dude, I sat there and he was telling me their interview process, what they learned. It was unreal. I was like, it was this, it was this. I mean, it was.
Can you give some free game?
Yeah, I mean, it was like we need to find out. But one of the things they would do, I mean, like like they had a few tests that they had to take, but it wasn't just like, oh, can you do this thing? It's like, no, you had to learn all this. And then once they did all that for you, then the training for you was like this, and you had to like, it's not only one level, you had like 3 levels of training that you had to do, and it was so systemized how they did their levels of training. And then you had to go to this, and you had to go to this, and if you didn't get this, then you had to do this. It was just like, you're like, oh, I see why they're really good. I see why, they're pushing. I see why, they're pushing really strong and doing a great job of hiring minorities. Because they had a very clear objective. I think it was like their level 6 or something like that. I could be mistaken, where they're like, no, we're trying to hire people, minorities at this level. They're very clear. This is our goal. We want to do this. And then how do we help build that and support that? And so, again, I think great companies have those processes. And I think that's why they are who they are and people are who they are. So,
what do you think about when larger organizations talk about development? There's sometimes this language where it's like, we just want everybody to take personal ownership to how they grow. And I know that this is nuanced, but whenever we hear that, it hits me as like an abdication of like, we want you to take responsibility because we don't really want to be engaged.
Yeah, I think that there is a part where people have to want to, and I know you agree with this, I think where people have to take responsibility for their growth. But I also think, too, you have to be an organization that, you have to, get people to, you have to demand within your organization to grow. Here's the truth about it. You can't work here if you're not going to try to develop. After a while, I'll give you a very little bit of time. After that, I'm like, no, you got to go. Because here's what you're going to do. Then what I know about you, you're just trying to always get to safe, calm waters. And we have a nimble, fast organization that's trying to push, again, in the work that we do. We're not like typical consulting firms. Again, we go about it completely different in how we do our training, our development, how we, maybe we're similar with how people help discover the issues and problems. But when it actually comes to developing plans and how we actually put that together, and we are curating that directly to the organization, man, you got to be a learner, and you got to be moving, and we move fast, and we're not trying to go to safe waters. So if I know you're not trying to develop, then you can't be here. And so I think that there's a part of it where that's a part of the organization too. But you're right. Sometimes they abdicate that. Well, yeah, it's them and it's your personal, your personal growth and things like that. And I'm like, well, do you do anything to make people want to grow? And are you giving them those things? I just think the more I'm in it, there's just such bad development stuff within organizations. I listen to them say, I try to put myself, if I worked here and they brought this my way, I'm like, there's a snowball's chance, I would do that. But then I've got some really good ones. I got a good friend of mine who works for, I think it's Charles Schwab. I think it's Charles Schwab. See that or TD Ameritrade. It's one of the two. And anyway, but regardless, he's talking to me about his development pathway, and I'm like, dude, that's really good. And then he's now over development stuff within one of the offices, a big major office that they have, and he's killing it with his development. But they give him freedom, but also these things. And so I think great companies that stand the test of time have great development things, and they force their people. And when I say force, it's the peer pressure. You don't develop, then you'll get out, and we'll force you out. You won't want to be here and people will pass you up if you're not trying to develop. So,
would you say you're a high performing leader?
Yes. I wouldn't have said that a few years back, but yeah, I do. And I think the reason why I could say that is because I think of going through the definition. I think that, I think what can define that, the people around me. You know what I'm saying? People like yourself. Even Grady, as being a producer, I've watched, I've known Grady forever, and watching him, over the last year and some change working, and just how the development and the growth and being in the environment has actually helped him grow, not only in what he's doing here, but what he's doing in, other things, out here, other projects that Grady's on that I connected him with. And the people are they rave about, oh man, Grady does this. And I remember when Grady wasn't doing that, you know what I'm saying? And so watching that. So to me, I get hype about that because the environment kind of pushes that. Or I look at, people who, wouldn't have been able to do what they do if I wasn't doing what I do. And what I mean by that is not because I'm I'm not like Jesus. What I'm saying is that I do believe that God endows people with gifts and I think the responsibility is to actually create and make ways for other people. And I think I've been able to do that, is to make ways for other people to actually walk into those things and also demand that they reach the highest level of their potential. So I think I do that. I mean, but you work for me, so I mean, I'm not going to fire you if you say no. So what do you? So, like,
Thanks.
You tell me.
No, I definitely think that. I almost wasn't going to ask you if you thought that. I was just going to be like, so obviously you're a high performing leader, and then ask my question. But I wanted to ask you.
Do you think you are?
I don't think that I have arrived. I think that there's so much for me to learn. I think that and I would love to hear your feedback, but I think probably for the capacity that I could reach, I think that I've probably just started getting momentum within that. And at the same time, based off how we're defining it, so as an example, whenever I was in high school and I was like doing competitive sports, the team that I was on since I was on it my freshman year has won first or second place in state and nationals ever since then. Before that, had only won state one time.
Wow.
So, and I don't think that solely landed on me. Obviously, I wasn't the coach, but I remember very specific times when I was, 14 on this team. And it was like it started the momentum of levels of excellence that needed to raise the bar. Not because I was crazy talented, but because I worked my butt off so much so that people were getting, like, I was taking people's spots, and that had never happened before in that program at that level. And so with that example in mind, there's parts of me that say, oh, I think I do that naturally in some ways, as far as when I am a part of something. I do think that the level of excellence or the standard starts to raise because people want to keep up with the pace that I create. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I always, again, and one thing in this, if you listen to this podcast after a while, listen, I'm very well read. I listen to a lot of stuff, but a lot of times I'm going to always go back to athletics. So it's just naturally in me. I grew up in that world, but I kind of compare people to like basketball, for example, players. So like I always tell people, there's like franchise level players. There are people who are like franchise level where, Luka Doncic, he plays for the Dallas Mavericks. Like, he's a franchise level. Victor Wembanyama from San Antonio, if he stays healthy, he's a franchise. I mean, he's a max money, like, I'm probably going to be in the Hall of Fame type of guy if they develop whatever. I actually think you have that from an organizational standpoint. I think you have that ability. And I think I see glimpses of it all the time. I was actually talking to somebody today who you actually helped work with yesterday. And just the ability at your age, and they're older. I mean, almost maybe, again, like, they're probably 15 years older than you are. And you were able to, like, really help them see something that they weren't able to see themselves. They're like, oh, by them saying this. And it was something that I've been communicating, but it's something about when I, again, as the boss, as their leader, they hear it, but sometimes there's so much anxiety around that. Even no matter how I say it, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, she said this, I gotta get better, okay. And then they freak out and they don't hear stuff. You were able to help them see, like, no, when he's telling us to do this is what he's meaning. This is why he's doing it. This is why he feels this way. And you were able to take that and think critically about it and break that down. And I think that's why it goes to it. I think you do such a great job of thinking critically, and you're just going to get better and better. Because here's the truth. No one younger wants to hear this. You get better as you get older. Because you just have more, like, data. And it's like something, well, no, I think that's wrong. And, I don't know if ageism is a thing or whatever, but, like, it's like, well, it's, when you're older and you say that, you're like, no, young people, we can do this. Yeah, you can. But there's only so much
Yeah.
It's just you haven't had enough life. And that doesn't mean, like, for what you're going. That's what I think you do a great job of. You're like, oh, for where I'm at, yeah, I think you're at a high level, and I think you are moving in that direction to be a really, really high capacity leader. And I see glimpses of it right now. I think people get better when they're around you. So you're doing it, and you'll just do it at a more and more of an elite level as you continue to keep doing what you've been doing. You keep doing the work you've been doing. I think it keeps progressing.
Yeah, well, I think that part of the aspect of time and experience too is like what 40 pounds feels like to me right now. Yeah. Will feel like nothing for me 10 years from now.
Yes.
Only if I stick with it.
Yes. Because here's why. It's because this is why the stuff that we do, why I'm at 45 years old, I am, and I'm not just saying this because it's something I preach and do. I just have seen it in my own life. So it's like, listen, I am not only someone who pushes this, I am a user of it, okay? And it's the fact of the internal work of self-awareness and resilience and the ability to empower is so important to your development as a leader, because the more you start to understand your feelings, the meaning behind what you are doing, it allows you to then show up, read information well. When moments happen, you're able to like, man, okay, that made me feel some type of way. Matter of fact, I acted out of character. Okay, then you're able to, okay, why did I act out of character? I'm able to dig through that and learn from that, because now I can tell you at 45, the more and more I become really clear on certain things, and every level I feel like I've had to take a step in. I think if I've done anything well, one of the things I just have, sometimes it's slower than what I think it's needed to be because it's on me, but I think I just keep moving forward. I just keep taking steps forward to take that next rung up the ladder. The willingness to die to this part of myself, the willingness to face this issue, the willingness to face this fear, the willing to say, hey, to speak out about something or to learn about this or take a step back and not say a whole lot. It's now allowed me at 45 to where I can just see things so fast, so clear, because I just have kept doing it. And I think the more reps you do, you hit this sweet spot and you're just like, oh man, it's just really different. And I feel like over the last several months, I've started to really, really hit this part of like growth that I never thought I'd be. I had a mentor say that to me one time. They're like, listen, your most effective work in your life will be between 50 and 60 years old. And I used to be like, what? No way. And I'm like, and dude, it's 100%. If you do what you need to do personally, and here's what I also tell you too, because this does matter, and you do what you need to do if you're married and your family. Because the one thing about it, we live in a world today to where like, it ain't back in the day where I was growing up, when you're 18, get out and you can't come back home. Like that world don't exist, especially here in the U.S., right? If you do a good job raising, when I say good job raising your kids, like your kids are not like, they're not out there just slapping people. They're just actually functioning adults, right? You will now have wisdom and another part is your health. If you're healthy, you have wisdom and you have energy to then go do stuff. And I'm telling you, you just move. And I'm seeing some of this at 45.
Yeah, I am so excited for you to be 60. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I was actually thinking about this week. I was like, I cannot wait to see how you move different when you're 60 versus now.
And it's crazy because I don't feel like I can move. I feel like I'm really hitting like a stride right now. But then in the same breath, I hit this. But then this week, I'm wrestling with certain things internally of like, saying this, not saying this. If I do say that, what would they think about this? Are they, because here's what I say. I just have seen leaders who get in this bottle and they think everything they say and do is right. So I always lean, but it's what, I always lean a certain way, but it's what Dr. Zoda always tells us, right? Dr. Mike Zoda, leading family therapist who's on our team, he says wisdom is a ditch. You have one side, you have the other side. Wisdom is a road, you know what I'm saying?
With ditches on either side.
Yeah, with ditches on either side.
And towards one ditch, and whatever ditch you're in, you're always afraid of being in the
other
one.
ditch. And so it's like kind of having crooked handlebars, right? I used to have crooked handlebars. It's like, so you like, if your handlebars go to the left, you kind of like had to like turn them to the right, like even though it doesn't look straight. And for me, I naturally lean toward, I don't want to be the arrogant leader or the leader in a bottle who doesn't like listen. So I naturally go there to more like defeated, more like not confidence. So I'm always worried that I'm going to go in a ditch of arrogance, right? But the truth be told, I'm going to more go to the ditch of being defeated, not having a proper view of self that's healthy, And so now, honestly, I do need to lean more toward that. I do need to listen more to my gut. I probably need to cut down on the amount of people I'm asking what they think about this, because I don't go there. I need to actually trust and believe and look at the evidence, because I think so many times I take too long to make some decisions because I'm worried. And again, why am I worried? Because honestly, underneath it, I'm worried about sometimes it's not about, oh, well, this messed this person up, met this person up, but we lose this. Okay, this will cost us this. It's usually like, it's honestly perception. If I don't do this right, what are people going to think? If I don't do this, what if I am wrong about this? What about this? And so I think that's where I'm learning to like really push myself more to like go through the process, check. But once I know that I know, then make the decision, because I've felt it before.
Okay, well, as a high-performing leader, can you give some thoughts on rhythms that you've kind of had through time to help continue to develop you?
Yeah, I would say this. One of the things, especially I would say right now, in an information like just like we are in like just an oversaturated information market. The information's everywhere. The ability to access things are everywhere. What I would tell you is that it's important to understand what you're trying to work on and develop, and just focus on that. From the podcast you listen to the books that you read, to the articles that come across your thing, to maybe what you follow on your social media feed. You need to know that, and then you need to curate everything there, because what will happen, you will become so inundated with so much information, and that you won't actually dig into deep into a subject to actually learn that subject. So like this year, one of the things that I'm looking to try to do is like, my theme is clarity wears the crown, right? How do I learn to be really, really clear? How do I learn to do that in an empathetic way, but a very direct way? Where am I not being clear? So I'm listening to more actual biographies and autobiographies. Why? And I'm listening to, man, what were ways that were life changing for people, that when they were really clear, when Martin Luther King made this decision, what went into that? When he was clear to get up there, I have a dream, or clear to join when he decided to be the leader, kind of when they were doing the bus boycotts and they kind of anointed him to be the leader to do it, the process of what he went through, because he made a very clear decision. And what, and again, that's a whole other subject for that. Abraham Lincoln, we're going to listen, we're not going to break this union up. If that means we have to go to war, we go to war. Okay. I reread Will Smith, listen to his autobiography.
Everyone should listen to
everybody should listen. This is my second time.
Not read it, listen
to it. Second time doing it, it's even better the second time. But like, man, when he, I finished it yesterday, and one of the parts it talked about is when he was going, and there was a dark side to all this, but when he made that run, no one has made a run in history like he has. I mean, like, his sales are higher than anyone now, and that's when you literally had to go buy a ticket. You weren't really, it's hard that you weren't going online. I mean, you were, but it's all that stuff, and tickets were like half the price of what they are now, and he still, no one's ever really caught him. I mean, that run that he had. Now, when you look at his decision making, here's what he started really making that run is when they found out a way. He really listened to, and this will hopefully help people understand this, because his guy, call him JL said, man, what do you want? He's doing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They're killing it. And JL says, man, what do you want? He's like, what do you mean what I want, man? I want to make money. I want da-da-da. He's like, no, what do you want? Then finally, Will was willing to say this. He got clear, and he says, I want to be the world's biggest action star. I want to be the world's biggest movie star. He's like, okay, that's something I can work with. So they started digging in what all they had in common, and they found the threads. Something like, there was I think it was there's an action, there's an action part of it, something like, alien thing, or, some action part, and there's a love part, whatever. So he found the formula. Then the other parts of what he decided to do is when he was working with Ali, when he turned down a movie that was going to pay him $15 million. Or no, it was, I think, $10 million early on when he was first doing this, and he turned it down because it was a movie that wasn't fitting who they were. Then, anyway, all that being said, when they did Ali, the fight guy who he hired for Ali, the discipline, so every time Will and them would go into training or they go into a movie, they treat it like training camp. 5 miles at 5. I mean, and everyone was in the camp. If you were on his team, you're up at 5 at 5. If he wasn't eating candy, you weren't eating candy. And it made them make this run, this crazy discipline he had. Anyway, my point of why I just gave you all of that was to say, I was like, man, what was the decision-making process? But also, what was the dark side to that? Mm-hmm. Because I think you could do that and be that successful, and you're going to have
cost him so much.
Yeah, it's cost him so much, and I think he's still going to have a dark side, because when you really listen to him, and this doesn't mean to go on this whole Will Smith thing, it's just been there, is that honestly, and when I talk, it helps me actually like relearn the information. But the one thing about him was that it wasn't so much what he did, it was just he did not have the ability, and he admitted this, to see what everybody else needed. He had a vision, and I'll never forget that line where he says that Willow said to him, where Willow was sitting there rubbing his beard and he says, I feel sad for Daddy, Mommy, because he has a family in his mind, and we're not it. Mm. And it was like, and what she was saying was like, no, he wanted a great family, but he wanted it like this versus the one he had. And then giving Jada the ability to do some stuff without this, like instead of like buying that big ranch that he didn't want. I mean, she didn't want that. Okay. That's willing to, I'll give that up. You know what I'm saying? In the grand scheme of things, that really worth it. Mm-hmm. I'll give this up, for my kids, whatever. The point is that he could have done all that stuff and still did this. The flop of a movie, and the flop that he had with Jaden, I forgot what movie it was. It was because After Earth, it was a flop because he didn't do the same training fight camp like he did, and he was like, I want Jaden to know I was there, that I supported him, and that his dad was, but that was out of a broken part of him and Jaden's relationship, and so he could have still done the fight thing, blah 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 blah, whatever. My point is that I'm just learning, man. Okay. How important it is to be aware of what I'm doing, so I'm gathering information right now, right? So I said, I guess a freaking long way to say it's gathering information and knowing what you're supposed to do. That's the rhythm. The rhythm for me, if you want to be a high capacity leader, what do you need to highlight in this season of your life, and what do you need to get better at, and then begin to put everything around your life around that thing, trying to learn, trying to grow, putting yourself in those types of environments. And right now, for me personally, it's like, man, I want to just people who've made very clear decisions. Why? And how did they do that? And how did they process that? That's kind of the information I'm learning right now.
Fun question to close us out.
Yep.
What do you hope to see happening within the world when you're in your 60s?
What I would like to see is that people we're better as, and I'm just going to use the context of right here in America, that we're better at being okay with who we are and a real sense of who we are. I think what has been pushed and propped up is a fake, the thing authenticity that we put out there and in our culture has been done wrong. And I think it's very harmful for people. I think it's leading people down roads that's going to have, and it's already having tremendous impact on their mental health. What I would love to see is people being authentically who they are, where they're okay with, man, I just want to help children, and I want to be a school teacher, and I want to be a kindergarten teacher, and man, I'm okay with making $40,000 a year. I'm willing to live below my means in order to do that, and man, and that being celebrated and people being really okay with that. I also want to see in there that, man, we begin to have leaders, especially in more of the civic places in our government, who begin to now lead in a way, in a manner for the people. And I believe the only way that happens is you have to have multiple parties. I think in this election right now, again, though, I have a lot of fundamentally disagreements with RFK, what I do appreciate is someone willing to step out there and to run in a third party lane because we have to get a third party. Listen, the market doesn't change until you put competition into the market. So why Republicans and Democrats don't have to change? There's no competition. They're just competing against each other. And so they kind of, we disagree with this, but it's like this whole deal and people are bought and they're whatever. Now it's like, no, if you actually have some real independence starting to go. So I'm hoping, in the next 15 years that there's 3 or 4 parties that begin to go, because I think it would begin to make our nation better in being able to do that. So those are things I want people to be okay with who they are, really authentic, and really leaders. I would love to see in our civic multiple party system, but it being because people now just want to govern for what they want to govern for the betterment of people. And unfortunately, what I don't want to have happen, but it seems sometimes it has to happen, it's like crap has to hit the fan really bad.
Yeah.
And that's my fear. My fear is something has to hit the fan really bad in order for that to take place. And so,
would you ever run for office?
Wow, great question.
We've never talked about this.
We haven't. It would have to be the right situation. It really would have to be the right situation. And but that would be I say that, but that's still a long shot for me because I hate raising money. I do. I don't freaking like asking people for money. Like if I'm independently at a really high wealthy level and I could ask people came to me because they believed, we're just going to get behind you and fund you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would do that. But I don't because I think when you start doing that crap, you become beholden to people, man. I'm like, I'm not going to be beholden to anyone. So I think that's you're not going to have leverage on me. So I think that's the hard thing for me running for politics. You're not going to have leverage on me. So I think that would be the only reason why, we kind of shy away from that and do that. Let me ask you this. What do you think in the next 10 years, what would you like to see different in the world? Coming from somebody from a different perspective, what would you like to see?
I would, it's a little bit morbid.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah. Honestly, I want to see the thing happen that's going to absolutely disrupt everything that we have going on right now, even from a global standpoint, because I think that COVID, this is not Bible by any means, but is the first phase of something that I think might have a little bit more of a massive disruption on society. Like we've talked about this. So something wild happens with the internet and we suddenly lose all the levels of access that we currently have. I have a weird affiliation and I think appreciation for things like that. Specifically because I feel the value in leading through it. Yep. And I just feel that within me. And so that's something that actually excites me. I'm like, can we please bring the thing that's going to take us away from the luxuries that we've had that's kind of fueling our self-deceit and our pride. And how are we going to respond when that happens? Seeing the world humbled is in some senses very exciting. Yeah.
And I don't disagree with you. And here's the crazy thing for me. I just have had, again, I'll put it down and I hope I'm completely wrong. So this is one of those moments where you're like, okay, if it is, here's a receipt. If not, I'm completely wrong. I think there's just been this thing in March of this year, in a month from now, that I just think that there's something. I don't know what it is. Don't know what it'll be.
You can just feel it
Yeah, I just feel like there's something that, and whether if it's the beginning of something or it becomes a major thing, I just think that it could become one of those things. And so, but I do agree with you. I do think there's something that has to kind of get us to a place of shifting us and humbling us a little bit. And so who knows? Who knows what that looks like? Who knows what that means? So, but yeah, I mean, we are in a time, but I also think it's moments like this to where when things get like that, you actually can lead. And I think leaders, it still goes to what I said. I think the world is in desperate need of authentic leaders. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the work that we do is so important, is to actually raise up authentic leaders. Because authentic leaders, they lead in the midst of turmoil and troubled times and times when things are uncertain. And so I think that that's where the world's at, where the world's going. And I think we have to continue to keep doing the work that we're doing. And hopefully through this podcast, it motivates, inspires people, and equips people to actually to do that and to move forward with that. Sweet.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the podcast, everyone. If we added you any value, please leave us a review. Give us not give us a like. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Give us a connection on LinkedIn. And we would love to hear your comments, your questions, your concerns.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep writing new rules.